passe super, l'artiste, super, encore un but sensationnel. That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mahe. Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! Vi er i semifinale igjen!
Hello everybody, welcome to the Uniformed Handball Hour. It's another morning club brought to you by Brian Campion and this time Chris O'Reilly. We're going to talk today about the women's Final Four in the MBM Dome in Budapest, which is coming up this weekend. And for those of you who don't know, the pairings are ready. We have Gjør versus Vipers at 3:15 on Saturday and FTC versus Esbjerg, the later match at 6 o'clock. Chris, what's your feeling now as we approach this monumental event in what we presume is going to be a packed arena, if not sold out by Saturday?
Yeah, I think that, the fact that it's probably going to be a packed arena kind of says everything about this event and one team in particular that's going to be in it for the first time. It's Fradi, FTC. The old rail cargo Hungaria has rolled into the station at long last after years and years of disappointment. Yeah, it's...
And also Gabor Elek's his last hurrah as well as the conductor of this train, if we're going to keep up that that nice...
Yeah, what a way for him to go out. Also, Zita Susanski, one of the club legends, who it's also going to be the end of her time with them. And, you know, everything about the Final Four in Budapest has always been about like the crowd for Gjør, first of all, but also like people wondering, imagine what it would be like if FTC were here. And now we don't have to wonder anymore. It's funny because, you know, looking at this season and the way it has gone for FTC as well, like thinking back to, it was like a 20-goal loss to Bietigheim. Were you at that game? I think it was a match of the week, wasn't it? Early in the season. 20-goal loss to Bietigheim, to then having one of the most amazing comebacks away from home in a second leg of a quarterfinal to beat Metz and qualify. And yeah, it's just it kind of had to happen this way. It's very FTC, the whole thing, except now they're finally in it. And that leaves me excited to see what the hell is going to happen this weekend, because at the best of times, we have no idea what's going to happen.
I think in a way it's probably not very FTC like the season, because normally they're quite impressive to very good and then they go out with a whimper. Whereas this time they've been totally all over the map, and then they pulled off probably one of the biggest shocks by beating, you could say arguably form-wise, the best team in the group stage. Metz only lost one game, and we're looking really, really dominant the whole way through. And then after that really dominant first leg performance, everyone had written them off. Then we were talking about all classic FTC, but then they probably did the most un-FTC thing ever and pulled off this huge comeback. And fourth in Group A, so it's been, as I said, it's been very up and down for them all season long. But I would love to see them get to a final. I mean, that would be really incredible. And we know from years of experience that anything can really happen. That form doesn't mean all this much going into these final games. And you can look at all the times that, or the teams that have played each other this season that are at the Final Four. And I think it doesn't really tell you a whole lot either. Obviously, FTC and Vipers, obviously they're not playing each other in the semi-finals, but they have played each other this season. Been very close. Vipers winning by 1 and then a draw. And then we've Gjør and Esbjerg, with Gjør winning both of those games, but very narrowly. So going into it, just generally it feels like it's going to be very, very tight when you look at the spread of results when they have played each other this season. So anything can happen really, and I think this is a really big chance for FTC and a really good last hurrah for Gabor Elek to cement his name finally as being a legendary manager. I mean, he is a legendary manager of the club, but if they were to get to the final, I think would be absolutely huge.
It's funny because he pretty much after they qualified, he was like, right, that's my job done. It's time to go. It's not going to get any better than this. Whatever happens in Budapest at the Final Four, I've done what I can. And you know, like looking at these 4 teams, they're all experienced, some more than others. Like Esbjerg, kind of coming into this after a pretty disappointing Final Four last time around. Don't know if you remember Henny Reistad, just how like fuming she was at the end of that weekend, despite playing her heart out, but coming back with a better team than last year and a better Henny Reistad again. Vipers coming into it as just like a completely repackaged team all over again. And after what they did last year, where, I don't think so many of us gave them a real chance of doing it back to back. And then afterwards it was like, well, of course, look at how they played. and Jura, who, if they're not in the final, then it's just a nightmare for them every time. But with an incredible squad as well. But FTC playing at home, like these women got a chance to train a few times in this hall. This is how like heavily stacked this is in their favor. Like there's they've had a chance to go into the empty MVM Dome on a few occasions. The court was already rolled out for them. They probably cancelled the Robbie Williams gig or something so that they could they could train a little bit extra. And there's a few players in there as well who know how to do it. You've got Tomori in there. He's got 4 Champions League titles to her name. 1 at last season with Vipers. Dragana Sujic has got a couple of titles to her name. Andrea Lekic only has 1 title, but has been in the Final Four probably as much as if not more than anyone with all those years in Vipers. So they've got a hell of a lot of smart players in there who know how to navigate this event. And then other players like Angela Malestein, who has won a world championship. And so, yeah, it's a sneaky good team there. And they know better than anyone that anything can happen over the course of 60 minutes. And they've beaten Jura this season on a couple of occasions. So winning a cup against them. So, yeah, I mean, in one way, a part of me would have thought having Metz in this would have been, the perfect quartet, but FTC really does give it a completely different edge.
Yeah, you feel like the core of their firepower will come from obviously Bulk, Kleiber, Lekic and Malestein. But if they are going to do something really special, you always kind of feel like, or you look back at past Final Fours, there's always those secondary players that need to step up. And I was looking at this FTC team, I was trying to think who from FTC is going to need to step up. And it probably might come down to someone like Alicia Stolla, maybe. She's had a decent season. And when I saw her playing in Hungary, she'd had a very good game, one of the match of the weeks. And she won player of the match. And she's like, 25 goals this season. But it could come down to someone like surprising like her playing out of her skin. Because obviously the core crew will need to play amazing. But they do also have 2 very good goalkeepers as well to fall back on. And we know we've seen Blanca Biro over the years pulling out some amazing performances. So I think they do have it in their locker. But Team Esbjerg is no pushover by any means.
Looking at the rest of the teams then, any other big news or topics that you think are going to come into focus this weekend?
I think probably, it feels like every team, their coach is leaving this season. I think every team, the coach is leaving this season, so it's not really a headline really.
But Ambrose merry-go-round managerial this year.
Yeah. Jesper Jensen is leaving as well, but next year. Yeah. But all the rest of them are leaving this season. But obviously Ambrose Martin, this would be his last one, and he obviously is the 5-time All-Star. He is Mr. Final Four, isn't he, in terms of coaching? It'll be his 8th Final Four. So it's going to be interesting to see how he sets up this Györ team, because it's been since 2019 since Györ have won a title. But it's funny when you see online people are saying, "Oh, Györ aren't what they used to be," but at the same time they haven't won the Champions League since 2019, and it's clear that. But everyone has this automatic kind of reaction to a Final Four of putting Györ in as the favourites every single time, whereas I don't think you'd put them in as favourites this time. I don't know, it doesn't really feel like that.
Yeah, I agree.
That might benefit them as well this time out, They don't seem to have the same quite high-end firepower that other teams have. When you look at their top scorers, there seems to be a nice spread of goals across the team, but they obviously don't have a Henny Reistad scoring 130 goals. They maybe, after Anna Gross and Zamenko, kind of gets quite fairly a bit more pedestrian. But it's going to be interesting because it is obviously when with Gjør playing, it's going to be a huge home advantage there as well.
What do you think?
Would you put them in favorite positions, or what do you?
No, I
feeling?
wouldn't. I think you're right there. The name carries a lot of weight, but also it's interesting because Ambrose Martin has come in for a little bit of criticism in the last couple of years since coming back over to take over the team, because he hasn't been able to drive them to the title, and they've been thwarted by the likes of Vipers, and that was a real tactical masterclass last year. That whole weekend from Vipers. But when it comes to the pure, let's say not firepower, but the pure star power of the team, that kind of makes me think, you don't need, there's two things you need, right, to win a Final Four. Everyone says the goalkeeper is the most important one. And then a secondary one, I think, is someone like Marketa Jerebkova, last year, who just exploded, or what you might expect someone like Peter Nenadic to do sometimes, just explode and score 8 or 9 goals in a game, or what Esbjerg are going to get Reistad to do in every game. But the goalkeeper is from Gjør. I mean, who are you going to choose? It's not Silja Solberg has been the top goalkeeper. Sandra Toft is probably on her day, or most days, the best goalkeeper in the world, and then Amadine Leydon has come back as well, who and that was just a fantastic piece of news, but not a surprise in the slightest as well. So will all three of them be in the squad? And if so, who will play? When? Who will take over the crunch time? Are they spoilt for choice?
I mean, it is a wonderful problem to have,
Yes.
isn't it? I mean, one keeper playing well, take them immediately off. You have another world-class keeper going in. You have arguably the top 3 goalkeepers in the world there, and you just can rotate them in and out.
At least in the last 5 years, all three of them have been the best goalkeeper in the world at a given day.
Yeah.
I don't know, the last time the backcourt is, maybe a little bit of a worry, because when you have Anna Gross coming into the team has balanced that a lot, but then Chris Jansen is not there because she's pregnant. Oftedal, she has her days, and then there's other days, particularly in the Final Four, where it might not work. And like I said, they all tap along with their goals, like Enziminko, Oftedal. If both of them play like they played in the final weekend of the Euro back in November, then yes, they should absolutely hammer. All of them on their day, probably as a collective, can be better than anyone else, but that doesn't seem to happen often enough. So I wouldn't put them as favourites, but I also would not count them out. And I think that is going to be an incredible semi-final between
I mean,
them
it's
and
really
Vipers.
hard to pick a favourite, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, just the fact that Vipers have the back-to-back, you probably would put them in as favourites. And you mentioned Jerebkova there. When you think of her performance the last Final Four and how out of the blue that was, but the probably more impressive thing is how she has kind of just completely
Backed it up, huh?
taken on that role,
Yeah.
and just been like, I'm just going to be the best player on my team now. I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing. Because when she came to Vipers at the beginning, people were a bit like, that's a bit of a strange sign, and 37 goals in the European League, it's fine and all, but and then she just has absolutely a complete late bloomer.
Yeah. And she's finishing with the club as well. She's off to Denmark next season.
ECAST.
But that's the backcourt that excites me most, is Jerebkova, Yamina Roberts, and Vekareva. What a mix! With 3 completely different players who can just throw up random shit at you. I think that is going to be keeping Ambrose Martin up at night at the moment, thinking about how he's going to, what's going to be thrown at him, never mind how he's going to deal with it. But their defense, Gjør, is brilliant, so if anyone can deal with it, they can. So it's this really super high class semi-final on one side, and then it's Esbjerg, who feel like they should be motoring towards the title, but then they're coming up against the underdogs, the hosts, FCC, and you could easily see that go either way. But we only have 45 seconds left, Brian.
So yes, and that's a terrible thing, but we do have good news, because on Friday we're going to probably repeat some of these things we just said,
more detail,
in a lot more detail as well. And also Alex will be there, and we're going to be live on Home of Handball Twitch at, oh God, what time is it again?
7:30, is it?
7:30, yeah. This is great radio.
7:30.
Yeah, 7:30 until 9:30 live on the Home of Handball Twitch.
We'll have players in as well, hopefully, to chat to. And then we'll release it as a normal podcast as well. But do join us live to see our lovely faces. And it's going to be a big, great weekend in Budapest. And we'll be there to cover it all the way.